I was halfway through my coffee when Paul walked up and said, "Hey, I'll take it from here." He didn't even look me in the eye, just reached across my desk, closed my laptop like I was some intern who forgot to CC the client, and slid it toward himself. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He gave that little half smile, the one he saves for when he's about to pull some smug backhanded move. I'd spent 5 months building that proposal. 5 months. And now I was being told I wasn't senior enough. Like I didn't have over a decade in systems design. Like I hadn't torn apart Black Ridge's logistics flow line by line and rebuilt it from the ground up. I glanced over and saw Brian and Lindsay walking past, holding printed binders. I recognized the covers immediately. I designed them. My charts, my timelines, my cost reduction projections. Hell, I could see the footer on the one Lindsay was carrying. My initials. Still on it. They didn't even bother to remove them. Quick note, before we get deeper into this mess, tell us which country you're watching from. I sat at my desk, completely still. Couldn't trust my hands not to shake if I moved. I'd worked through food poisoning for that project. Took one vacation day in the last 7 months. Slept maybe 4 hours a night the last 2 weeks trying to refine the warehouse load balancing logic. And now I was supposed to sit quietly while they went in with my work and smiled for the client. Renee, our director, walked by, gave me a quick glance, then looked away. She knew, she had to know. I wanted to storm into that room and tear the pages out of their binders. Instead, I opened Outlook like a good little soldier and stared at my inbox. Pretending. I sat through the next hour pretending like I didn't care. Pretending like I didn't feel humiliated, erased, replaced. And then Paul came back, all cheerful. Tossed a sticky note on my desk with a few next steps written on it. "Went great," he said, like I should be proud. And that smug little smirk, like he expected me to thank him for letting my work get the spotlight without me in it. I didn't say a word. I picked up that sticky note, walked to the shredder, and fed it through. I didn't bother showing up to the follow-up meeting. Paul didn't ask me to. Nobody did. I sat in my cube and started documenting. Not for the team, for myself. Dates, revisions, versions, everything I'd built. I labeled every draft with my initials and backed it all up on a personal drive. If they were going to keep running with my work, I'd make damn sure they couldn't pretend I didn't exist. I'd joined Glenview Analytics 2 years earlier as a senior systems consultant, not some college hire. I had 12 years under my belt in logistics infrastructure, server-side load balancing, ERP integrations, inventory forecasting models, all the gritty back-end stuff that bored most people to death. But when it's done right, it saves companies millions. That's what I did. Quietly. Accurately. And usually without credit. The Black Ridge project was different. Big money, over $9 million on the table. Glenview had been chasing that contract for years and kept coming up short. They'd pitched twice before I got there. Nothing stuck. Then I found the flaw. Buried in Black Ridge's second-tier warehouse routing logic was a compounding delay loop, a bad redirect on overstock overflow. On paper, it looked clean. In practice, it was bleeding over $3.7 million a year in redundant labor and idle inventory. I found it in the third week of analysis, rebuilt the routing tables from scratch, ran simulations across 6 quarters. The solution wasn't flashy, but it worked. When I showed Paul, he grinned like he found it. "Nice. This might be our angle." Then he walked it straight to Lindsay. She was new, sharp, but surface level. Could recite strategy lingo, but I wouldn't trust her to explain a flow diagram if her life depended on it. Brian wasn't much better. He was fine with spreadsheets, but that's where it stopped. And yet, they were Paul's go-tos. Because Paul didn't care about skill. He cared about circles. He played golf with Jim, our founder. Was in all those after-hours Slack channels where they shared bourbon recommendations and congratulated each other on dumb fantasy football wins. That's what mattered, not the work, the image, the fit. And I didn't fit. I didn't fake laugh at Paul's jokes. I didn't join their happy hours or ask about his golf handicap. I did my job. I did it better than anyone else there, but that didn't mean a damn thing when it came to visibility. 3 days after the pitch meeting, Paul sent out a project-wide update. Said, Kudos to Lindsay and Brian for driving forward the Black Ridge breakthrough. That was the actual sentence. I read it twice, then stared at the wall for 10 minutes. I walked over to Renee's office. Door was cracked open. She looked up, tight smile, then glanced back down at her calendar. "I'm not trying to start anything," I said, "but just so you know, Brian and Lindsay didn't drive anything. They wouldn't know what to fix if I didn't hand it to them." She sighed. "I know. I've seen the docs. Look, it's not about contribution. Paul's just focused on presenting a unified front, meaning he wants a certain image for this team. Familiar faces. Executives respond better to names they've seen before." That's when it clicked. It didn't matter how airtight my data was. Didn't matter how much money I could save a company. If I wasn't part of the inner circle, if I didn't look right, talk right, golf right, I was just a tool. I left her office without saying another word, walked straight back to my desk, sat down, and started removing my name from future drafts. They wanted to pretend I wasn't there? Fine. I'd act accordingly. 2 days later, Paul held an all-hands huddle like he was announcing a goddamn merger. "Exciting news," he said. "Lindsay and I will be presenting the final Black Ridge proposal to their executive board next Friday." That was it. No mention of me. Not even a fake nod. I didn't react, not in front of them. But my ears were burning. After the meeting, I marched straight to Renee's office. She was typing something fast. Didn't even look up when I knocked. "I'm not on the presentation?" I asked. She paused, finally turned. "Paul wants to keep the boardroom light. Executive presence and all that. I built that solution." "I know you did." "Then why am I being cut out?" She shifted in her chair like she didn't want to answer. "Paul wants a senior image in the room. Consistent faces. He believes Lindsay complements his presence better for this audience." I almost laughed. She couldn't explain a flow control loop if it hit her in the face. "That's why you walked me through everything." "I'll be there. I can answer anything that comes up." "No," I said. "You think you can?" She tried to smile. "You've done good work. It's just not my face they want in front of the client. Got it?" I walked out before I said something I couldn't walk back from. I sat down at my desk and stared at my screen for a solid minute. Everything in me was buzzing. Not rage, not sadness, something sharper, cold, controlled. I opened the project directory. The optimization sequence, the one that actually solved the Black Ridge bottleneck, was in a modular file. I had built it clean, tight, isolated, easy to maintain, easy to remove. I highlighted it, hit delete. Gone. I didn't touch anything else. The report still looked solid. The diagrams, the charts, the flow visuals, all there. But without the actual sequence, it wouldn't hold up. Not in a real conversation. Not when the CTO started asking questions. And they would ask questions. Because Black Ridge wasn't some puff company. Their tech lead, Karen Miller, had a reputation. She was sharp, known for spotting BS in the first 5 minutes of a pitch. I didn't do it to blow up the deal. To them, it might look like sabotage. To me, it was protection. I just pulled back the one piece that proved I was the person who knew what the hell they were talking about. And honestly, it felt good. An hour later, Paul strolled by my desk like he didn't have a care in the world. Tapped twice on the side of my monitor. "Appreciate you laying the groundwork. Big day coming." I didn't even look at him, just nodded once. Renee sent over the final deck that night. Said she was looping me in for awareness. I opened it, scanned through, and saw my work plastered across every slide, every chart, every summary, every bullet point pulled straight from the documentation I'd written. Except now, the core was missing. I waited. Nobody noticed. They were so confident they didn't even double-check. Let them walk into that room blind. Let them feel what it's like to lean on something hollow. I didn't owe them an explanation. I owed myself a line in the sand, and I'd just drawn it. I sat at my desk, hands still on the keyboard, pretending to answer emails while my work was paraded across the screen in the conference room. Through the glass wall, I watched Paul click through my diagrams, my system flow charts, my projections. He was talking big, pointing confidently, like he'd designed the damn thing himself. Lindsay was nodding along like a backup singer. Renee sat at the far end, watching the Blackridge team closely. Then I saw her, Karen Miller, CTO, Blackridge's top tech lead. Short hair, no nonsense, eyes like a hawk. She hadn't looked up much at all through the first half hour. But 35 minutes in, she leaned forward. Didn't say anything right away, just stared at one of the slides. Then she pointed. From where I sat, I couldn't hear what she said, but I saw Paul blink. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. He looked at Renee. She grabbed the printed packet, flipped a few pages, then paused. Karen said something again, sharp, clipped, then looked directly at me. Paul turned, Lindsay followed, then the rest of the room. Every eye in that glass box shifted toward me, like someone had just asked, "Who actually built this thing?" A Slack message popped up on my screen. From Renee. "Need you in the room." Now I stood up slowly, rolled my sleeves down, walked across the office without saying a word. When I opened the door, the air changed. Karen leaned back in her chair, arms folded. "You're the one who designed this?" I pulled out the empty chair across from her and sat. Calm, steady. "Yes." She tapped her finger on the screen. "Where's the logic layer for the overflow loop? This shows projection, but not sequence." I nodded once. "It's not in the slides because it can't be." Paul stiffened. "We had to streamline for executive level." I ignored him, kept my eyes on Karen. "It's too complex to show as a static model," I said. "I built it as a conditional sequence engine that prioritizes root weights dynamically based on load prediction and shelf life decay. Want the flow? I'll walk it." She nodded. "Go ahead." So I did. I laid it out clean, step by step. The real architecture, routing logic, fail-safes, escalation triggers. Explained how the overflow delay was getting masked by inventory reshuffling. Explained how my solution would cut it by over 60%, even under peak load. Karen didn't interrupt once, just watched me, eyes sharp, tracking. At the end, she nodded slowly, then she turned to Paul. Why wasn't he presenting? Silence. Paul's mouth opened again, but nothing came out. Renee stepped in. "We were trying to keep the client presentation focused on what?" "Fluff," Karen snapped. "That's the real solution. That's what we came to see." The room went dead quiet. I didn't gloat, didn't smile, just sat there, letting it hang. Karen turned back to me. "You available for implementation if we move forward?" I answered before anyone else could. "Yes." Paul cleared his throat. "We haven't finalized team assignments yet." Karen raised her hand. "Then finalize them now." I didn't look at Paul. Didn't need to. I already knew what his face looked like. I closed the binder in front of me and stood up. "If you've got what you need, I'll head back to my desk." Karen nodded. "We've got what we need." I walked out slow. Didn't say a word to anyone. But inside, I felt the shift. They finally knew who the hell they were dealing with. I went back to my desk and sat down like nothing happened. My hands were steady, my face calm. But inside, I was on fire, not angry, just ready. 10 minutes later, Karen walked past me on the way out with her team. She didn't say a word, but she looked straight at me and gave a tiny nod. That was it. Game over. An hour later, Paul stormed into the back conference room and slammed the door hard enough to shake the glass. Renee was right behind him, lips tight, eyes darting toward the hallway like she hoped nobody saw. I got the "join us" ping 2 seconds later. I walked in without hesitation, sat down at the table like I belonged there, because I did. Paul leaned forward, red in the face. "You compromised the integrity of that meeting." I didn't flinch. "I fixed it." "You withheld part of the solution. You deliberately left out a critical section from the presentation deck. That's sabotage," Renee jumped in. "You should have brought this to us. We could have added it back in properly." I looked at her and said, clear as day, "If I had handed over the sequence, I'd have been erased." Again, she looked uncomfortable, shifted in her chair. "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is spending 5 months on a proposal, watching it walk into a room without you, and then being told to sit quietly while others take credit for your work." Paul scoffed. You don't understand how executive presentations work. No, Paul. You don't understand how solutions work. This isn't marketing. This is architecture. You walked into that room unprepared because you thought you could coast on optics, and it blew up in your face. He stood up, pointing. You think you can undermine leadership and walk away clean? I didn't undermine anything, I said. I protected my work. If I'd handed it over, nobody in that room would have known I existed. Renee tried to soften it again. There are processes. There were processes, I cut in, and none of you followed them when you stripped my name from the presentation. The room went quiet. Then Renee's laptop pinged. She glanced down and froze. Karen Miller just emailed, she said slowly. She wants confirmation that he'll be leading implementation moving forward. Paul's face drained. I turned to him and added, just loud enough? Still think I don't understand how this works? Nobody answered. I stood up, pushed my chair in, and said, if you need anything else, I'll be at my desk. Then I walked out. They knew. They finally knew. 2 hours later, I got the calendar invite. Subject line, conduct review. Attendees, Paul, Renee, HR, and Jim McClure, our founder. I walked in and they were already seated. HR rep looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Renee wouldn't meet my eyes. Paul was smug, arms folded, leaning back like he'd already won. Jim was dead center, quiet, watching. Paul started. We're here to address behavior that compromised a key client presentation. I didn't sit. I reached into my folder, pulled out a stack, and dropped it on the table, hard. Here's every version of the proposal, emails, revision logs, internal comments, delivery timestamps, track changes. My name's on every single one. Nobody said a word. I carried this project solo, I continued, from concept through architecture. The only reason Black Ridge is still in the room is because I walked in and fixed the mess your presentation team couldn't explain. Paul jumped in, defensive now. You intentionally withheld code. You undermined leadership. That's sabotage, plain and simple. I turned to Jim. No, it's not. It's the only move I had left. If I'd given them the final sequence, I'd be invisible right now. Again, Jim raised an eyebrow. Why not bring this to Renee? I did. She told me Paul wanted a certain image in the room. One I didn't fit. Renee shifted in her seat, voice low. You never said you planned to remove anything. I nodded. I didn't plan to, until I realized nobody was going to give credit where it was due. HR cleared her throat. Let's stay focused. Why remove the code? I looked straight at her. Because without it, nobody would know the truth. Paul scoffed. So now we're rewriting policy based on ego? Jim held up a hand. Enough. What's the fallout? HR glanced at her laptop, then blinked. Karen Miller emailed again. She said if he's not the primary implementation lead, they'll reconsider the partnership. Paul's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Jim looked at me. Is that accurate? She asked in the room, I said. I said yes. Paul started up again. This sets a dangerous precedent. We can't let people bypass leadership just because they feel slighted. Jim turned to him, cold. You're talking about precedent when we almost lost a $9 million client because you didn't know the material. Paul stiffened. I did what I thought was best for client optics. Jim leaned forward. And the client just told us who they trust. And it wasn't you. The silence that followed was loud. HR tried to steer it back. So what's the recommendation? Jim looked at me again. You willing to lead this all the way through? Already started, I said. He nodded once. Then let's move forward. Paul's face went pale. He knew. The power had just shifted, and he wasn't holding it anymore. As the room cleared out, Jim didn't say much, just raised a hand and nodded toward the door. Stay a minute. I shut it behind the others and sat back down. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. You played a risky hand. I didn't answer right away. But it paid off, he said, finishing his own thought. He reached into his folder, pulled out a fresh project brief, and slid it across the table. As of now, Paul's off the Blackridge account, effective immediately. From here on, you report directly to me. That landed, I kept my face still, but inside, everything shifted. Jim continued. You deliver this clean, I'll revisit your title and your compensation. Make it reflect the work you've already been doing. Appreciate that, I said, steady. He gave a quick nod. Keep it tight. And don't let your ego get in the way. Wasn't ego, I said. It was leverage. He didn't disagree. A week later, the finalized Blackridge contract hit legal. Word came down fast. I had to be listed by name as the project lead, not representing Glenview, not team liaison. Me, direct. Legal flagged it, called it unusual. Karen didn't care. She also added a clause, buried in the last paragraph, that if Glenview failed to support the project properly, I'd be allowed to consult independently on behalf of Blackridge. Jim called that part out in our next meeting. You see this? He tapped the clause. Yeah. She wrote in and out. For me, I said. He let out a low breath, leaned back in his chair. That's loyalty you don't earn. That's loyalty you prove. I nodded. So let's prove it. We negotiated that afternoon. Title upgrade, contract bonus percentage, reporting structure. I didn't hold back. And to Jim's credit, he didn't fight me on any of it. By the end of the week, my title read Technical Program Director. I was pulled into strategy calls, given headcount authority, loop access, bonus shares secured in writing. The project was mine now, top to bottom. Paul, he got reassigned to special projects. No announcement. Just vanished from the Blackridge threads and never mentioned again. I didn't gloat. Didn't need to. His silence said enough. Karen followed up with a single-line email. Glad to see they're finally listening to the right people. I forwarded it to Jim. He replied with one word. Earned. I didn't celebrate, just got back to work. Because I wasn't here to play nice anymore. I was here to deliver. The shift wasn't quiet. The whole office felt it. People talked. The ones who used to walk past my desk without eye contact suddenly wanted to say good morning. Some congratulated me in the break room. Others just watched with that look. The one that says, I wouldn't have done it that way, but damn. Renee kept her tone neutral, smiled when she had to. But her emails got shorter, colder, always CCing someone now. I knew the dance. Paul avoided me completely. He wasn't even pretending. I'd pass him in the hallway and he'd duck into the restroom like I couldn't tell he was hiding. I didn't care. Mark from Back-End Dev became my go-to. He'd always known who was actually doing the work, never kissed up to anyone, never chased credit, just delivered. Solid guy. I pulled him into my new team, along with 4 others, all overlooked, all sharp. Quiet killers who didn't play politics. I gave them ownership, not busy work, made it clear this isn't about hierarchy. It's about skill. We built tight. We tested early. We documented everything. No fluff, no egos, just clean execution. Blackridge's Phase 1 launch was a beast. 3 warehouse systems, 2 aging CRMs, and a broken WMS that hadn't been updated since 2012. But we locked it down. Ran sims, dry runs, redundancy tests. Launch day came. Not a single crash. Not one ticket flagged. 3 weeks later, the results were in. Inventory latency cut by 22%. Fulfillment lag dropped below target. System uptime was cleaner than anything they'd projected. Karen sent the results herself. The most seamless rollout we've seen in 10 years. No fluff, just the line. And I felt it. This wasn't luck. This was earned. And this time, my name wasn't buried in a footnote. It was at the top. A few days after the Phase 1 rollout, Jim called me into his office. Just me. No agenda, no CC. Just a quiet, direct, close the door. I sat down across from him. He slid 2 folders across the table. Both were active client leads. Big names, big money. Both asked for you by name, he said. I opened one of the folders and scanned the scope. Data migration, warehouse integrations, legacy system overhaul. My kind of puzzle. The other was similar, with even more budget attached. Jim leaned back in his chair, hands folded. You've become the closer. He wasn't smiling out of friendliness. It was respect. You've got leverage now. Don't waste it. I don't plan to. He nodded once, then waved me off. That was it. No fluff, no performance review. Just, here's the work. Now go do it. Word got around fast, not officially, but people aren't dumb. When you start skipping the middle layer and reporting directly to the top, they notice. Renee tried to reconnect after that. Showed up by my desk one morning with coffee. Just wanted to check in, see how you're handling the workload. Let me know if you need support. I looked at the cup, didn't touch it. Thanks, I said, then went right back to typing. She lingered like she wanted to say more, but I didn't invite it. I wasn't looking for fake alliances. Instead, I poured everything into the team. I carved out time every week to review code, teach structure, show the younger guys how to build things that last. Not just duct tape and dashboards, real solutions. And I made one rule: credit flows down. If someone wrote the logic, their name went on the file. If someone optimized a loop, their note stayed in the documentation. It started small, but it stuck. People noticed. Other teams started documenting more. Analysts started tagging developers in reports. Meetings shifted. Execs stopped asking, "Who owns this?" and started asking, "Who built this?" The culture was moving. Slowly, yeah. But it was moving. Not because someone gave a speech, because someone flipped the balance and didn't hand it back. 6 months later, I walked into Blackridge HQ like I owned the floor. It was Phase 2 review day. Results in hand, numbers locked. We'd beaten projections by 9%. Not close. Clean. Karen was already seated when I walked in. She gave that tight, satisfied smile, then nodded toward the screen. Let's see it. I walked through the numbers. Every benchmark, every system check, every logistics gain. She didn't interrupt once, just listened. She knew. When I finished, she glanced around the table, then back at me. Your team delivered, she said. You delivered. I turned and looked at them. The 4 guys I'd pulled from dead-end roles and side projects. Now they were known across 3 departments. Their names got mentioned in meetings now. They got pulled into planning, not just cleanup. I gave them the nod. They earned that. As we wrapped, Karen stood and walked with me toward the elevator. No small talk. Just business. Right before I stepped in, she handed me her card again. Still stands, she said. If Glenview ever stops appreciating you. I smiled. They've got a better track record now. Back at the office, Jim met me at the door with a handshake. First time he'd ever done that. You're not just technical lead anymore, he said. You're the model now. I didn't say anything, just nodded, because I knew it. Not because I played politics better, not because I talked louder, but because when it mattered, I stopped letting people walk over me. Because I flipped the table and made them listen. That one decision, to hold my ground, rewrote everything. For me, for my team, maybe even for the whole damn company. And if Paul's still bitter about it, good, let him be. I've got work to do.